What is going on, everyone? Welcome on into Open Ice Hits. There's a lot of drama to get into. Tom Wilson, the Rangers, that was an embarrassment, in my opinion, what we watched last night on television with all the drop fights. And unfortunately, the NHL put themselves in that position for it to be that ugly. But here's where we begin, Durso. Credit to me, all right? Let's give a round of applause to me, because we were supposed to record this on Wednesday, and I just didn't wake up. I hit the snooze button 15 times, and I woke up like, oh, damn it. I felt like such an ass, but it worked out in our favor because we got to see the rematch between the two teams, and we got to see the firing. So it was a benefit. So you're welcome, and that's where we begin.
I know I'm welcome, right? This is why do I feel like this is payback for you getting on my case for when I was down and out on that Sunday afternoon. What did you call it? You said I was snoring or whatever at one point in time or whatever. It's like, okay, this is what we get for trying to do this at the time we do. This is gonna be good though. I'm ready to get fired up this morning. Let's go.
No, I'm with you, dude. I was disgusted with what we saw. So I don't even know where to begin. The problem is there's 9 different ways that we can kind of attack this thing. So I mean, the freshest is witnessing the second game. All right, so they dropped the gloves in the beginning. We kind of expected for that to happen, but for a real statement to occur, I think it had to continue to get ugly. If it was just the first initial drop of the gloves and then they finished and completed out the hockey game like in a normal way or the most normal way possible, I think it loses the impact that the Rangers wanted to send, that message to the NHL, like, you did this. You created this mess. So, I don't know. I mean, I guess, was that good for the NHL? Was that bad for the NHL? I mean, there's a lot of people defending Tom Wilson, saying that that's his game. Everyone loves him. The locker room loves him. Guys love him. So, I don't know. I mean, I hated it, quite frankly. I hated everything about yesterday's hockey game. One of my buddies said, I bet you more eyes are watching this. Yeah, more eyes are watching this for a pathetic reason. I don't want people to tune into hockey because that's what they want to see. If that's the case, then hockey's in a bad spot.
There's so many places I could begin with this. I mean, oh boy. There's part of me that wants to go back to the beginning, which for us, since the last time we did a show, we could sit there and say it's been a week. I mean, it's been 48 hours at this point. Like, it's been quite a 48 hours. There's so much wrong with what happened in general. I mean, not only that, but to hear somebody like the way you just pitched that question too, to hear somebody who's been in the game as long as Pierre Maguire has and sit there and actually ask the question on air, would it have happened if they would have just suspended him for a game? What do you think would have happened if they had suspended him for a game? Do you think that the Rangers are worried about this anymore? He's not out there. Then you did your job as a league and protected the players and didn't force this to happen. And then very conveniently for somebody, I don't know who, maybe it was Peter Laviolette who said, hey, Tommy, you're not going back out there or whatever they call him, Willie, Tommy, whatever, who cares? And, or whether it was somebody from the league who decided we've seen enough of this now, knock it off or whatever. And they knew it wasn't going to be stopped. So they said, let's just get him out of the game. Well, that's your own fault. Don't put him back, don't allow him to play the game. It's as simple as that. He had no reason to play the game. And what's really embarrassing to me is the reason that all happened last night to begin with. Because you go back to we haven't done that many episodes of this show. We just started doing this in February, right? We already have an episode where the first line of the description is Tom Wilson suspended or getting suspended or whatever. So if we're already talking about this again, why was he allowed to play that game last night? If there was any consistency, and I noted that from the second I watched the video of Monday night, if there was any consistency to the way the league handles these things, he would not have been able to play not only last night, but he wouldn't be able to be playing for the rest of the week, the rest of the regular season, probably playoff games.
Yeah, that's what I wish
he got 7 games 2 months ago. 7 games.
I know.
And then he gets $5,000 fine.
That's a joke.
That's a joke.
The $5,000 fine was for the punch to Buchnevich, who was sitting on the ground. It wasn't even anything Panarin related, which is definitely terrible to see. So the league just had it completely wrong. And then Shane Gostisbehere gets 2 games, which I hated what Shane Gostisbehere did. That's Bush League garbage. That deserves a suspension. But how does one deserve a suspension without the other? And here's where I have such a major issue with Tom Wilson. I'm not anti-tough guy. I'm not anti the way he plays. I like the way he plays. But how come everybody else can find that line? There's one other guy that comes to mind. Brad Marchand. All right, he's a guy that seems to have a tough time figuring out that line. So everybody else, and look, there's a lot of guys that play physical. There's a lot of guys that have toughness to them. Sure, they're smaller guys, and it's not as physical as it once was. But this league is filled with hits and filled with corner battles and filled with plays after the whistle that never look as hideous as Tom Wilson and is never in the conversation as much as Tom Wilson. So how can everybody else figure this out, but this clown can't figure it out? That's my problem, is everyone seems to find it. Everyone seems to find that line. He can't find the line.
Well, not only, okay, so let's break that down in a couple ways. First of all, because you mentioned Marchand. Now, Marchand's smaller than Wilson is, so he does it in different ways. Like, he doesn't go out there and ragdoll somebody because he probably can't.
He'll lick you.
Yeah, which still crosses a line, but it's a very different way of crossing the line. Now, I saw a lot of people comparing what Tom Wilson did, and they fast forwarded to the next day and go, well, look at what Sidney Crosby did in that battle with Travis Konechny. And I go, there's a difference to me, though. It's behind the play. It's two guys who both were involved in that. That's not like it's a guy who's trying to come to the aid of a teammate and you go, not the first guy, not the second guy, but the third guy too. You know what I mean? Like, after punching a defenseless player in the back of the head, then a teammate comes to his aid, and then another teammate comes to the aid of that teammate, and that's when a guy finally gets hurt. So that's the problem I have with line crossing when it comes to Tom Wilson, is you had 3 opportunities to stop. You punched a guy in the back of the head who couldn't defend himself. Then a teammate came to his aid, and you should have just been able to. If that's the only guy you take to task, fine, because that's a teammate responding to his teammate. You know, okay, fine. But another guy jumps in. It's a star player, and you did not know when to stop. And quite frankly, that goes beyond the line. Like, that doesn't even toe the line. That just jumped right over it. And yeah, it just bothers. That's what bothers me. Like, the situations were different. And the second you brought up the Gossespierre suspension, the second I saw it happen, and believe me, there's people I saw, like, I think what was it, Scotty Upshaw said that's a dive, like stay on your feet or whatever. It's like, in real speed, real time, it happened in front of me from 300 feet higher, obviously, but happened in front of me from about the same angle an official would see it. It's dirty. It's late. You don't have to do it. And I knew it was going to happen.
Yeah, it's just not needed. Like, it was an empty net goal, and it was something that you, what's the word? I guess it's like you could escape that situation. There's no reason to even do it. So with Ghost,
and it makes it worse, too, in my opinion, because it's an empty net situation. It's not like you're trying to battle somebody out and get space, and he scores a goal on a net where the goalie's still in play here. It's an empty net. You knew he was going to score the goal, so it's a cheap shot. You know, it really is. But at the same time, like, I watch that and I go, I already know what's going to happen, because now the league is on watch. Like, that Department of Player Safety that didn't do their job 24 hours earlier is going to throw the hammer down, because they know that if they don't in that situation, it's even worse for them than it was before. But it didn't look any better when I even tweeted it out. I compared it. So he loses 2 games. Salary is $77,500, a little more than that, and if you get to the actual specifics, but let's just round it for the sake of argument. So 15 times the penalty that Tom Wilson took is what Shane Gossespierre gets, when he's never done anything like that before. And I chalk that up to, as much as it's a cheap shot and a dirty play, I chalk that up to frustration for a year gone wrong.
Yeah.
You're just frustrated. Yeah. All right. That's not his style. It's the same thing with Crosby doing what he, like, getting into a scrum with Konechny and kind of shoving his head into the ice a little bit.
I didn't like that Crosby one, though, because here's my problem with it. If that was Wilson who did that exact play, I'd be losing my shit. I'll be honest with you. If that was Wilson, I would be losing my shit. So I don't know how to weigh that, because I was
also too soon? Like, too soon after?
Maybe.
You know, I mean, it was 24 hours after Tom Wilson did his, you know, I mean, or basically, because it wasn't, they both played on Monday. So, like, I'm saying all 4 teams collectively, the Flyers played the Penguins on Monday. So did Washington. And that's when Wilson does his thing. So the next night, when Washington's off and the league's now paying attention to all 5 of those games probably a little differently than they did the others because, the day before, because they know that they messed up. There's no way that they don't.
Well, this
I
is
mean,
where
they have to.
Yeah, this is where I have a problem with it, though, because my one buddy who's a Capitals fan, and of course, he's actually reasonable with the situation. He's not obnoxious about it, which is nice to at least have some dialogue. But he asked me, what's the difference in Crosby and what's the difference in Wilson's spot? If you this is what he was saying hypothetically. If you kill somebody, you kill somebody. But what I say is, if you kill 30 people, I mean, you're not killing people, so it's different. You're not murdering a human being. So, but if you're a child and you're getting punished from your family or from your mother or your father, the 30th time you make a mistake, your punishment is going to be significantly worse than the second time you make a mistake. And I hated it. I hated what Crosby did, and I think it does set a bad look because you can shove someone's face in the ice, and if that was Wilson, we would be going crazy. So where do we draw that line? And another thing I hate, though, is he needs to be kicked out of the league forever. That's not going to be a thing. I do not like how Tom Wilson's career has played out. All right, he is the villain throughout this era of hockey, and nobody's touching it. But you can't throw the guy out of the league ever and ban him for the history of hockey. So once again, where do we find this line with this garbage? If you police it, and another thing, I mean, this thing just spirals out of control. If the game was policed by themselves, you wouldn't have this. No, if the league policed the league like they're supposed to, you wouldn't have it. It's not 1980 anymore. If the league did it, we wouldn't have to worry about the players doing what they did last night.
You mean by having a department that's titled player safety and actually doing what it says it's going to do and protecting the players?
It's a joke.
That was the joke of it all, too. All right, look, so the Crosby situation is a little different. Obviously, look, the first thing that comes into play here is who he is, right? There's a big difference between Sidney Crosby and Tom Wilson. League kind of knows that they probably, essentially, they can't suspend Sidney Crosby in a way. It's not I wouldn't call it immunity, but it's almost unfair immunity in his case because of who he is. Now that being said, I also called that a rare moment where he loses his cool. How often does Sidney Crosby lose his cool to that extent in a game? It's rare. So because of the lack of seeing it from him, you almost have to give him the benefit of the doubt that it's one incident. And to his credit, the rest of the game, he did focus on playing the game the way he knows how to play it. It happened one time and it was over. And it wasn't like it created, the other part of it also is that didn't create some bad situation, right? The play is over when Tom Wilson does what he does. Play's over. So, all right, you take a shot at somebody, then man up and stand in there and take the guy who comes after you for protecting his teammate. And you could be done with the situation right there if you would have just taken the roughing penalty that you were going to get for punching the guy in the back of the head and the fighting major you're going to get for who comes in and drops the gloves with you, basically. That's all it should have been.
It's funny you have that opinion, though, on this one. But the Connor McDavid elbow, you thought differently. Because he's not a player that does it, and it was like a one-time type of frustration penalty, and that you wanted him suspended. And Crosby, you don't.
Because
so you have a soft spot for Sidney Crosby, just like I do.
It's not that to me, though, because I didn't see Crosby do something that I felt like he targeted a guy, because they were both engaged in the situation. It's not like it was one, what McDavid did earlier. The other guy's not trying to do something to get himself hurt. And McDavid takes his frustration out and goes, I'm just going to throw an elbow, that's a little different to me than Crosby getting tied up.
Because Travis Konechny was in play as well during this, he lost his battle essentially to Crosby.
Which is what, I don't buy the whole idea that Panarin engaged in that by jumping in there like that. It's the third guy who had to come in to try to stop this guy from continuing to do what he was doing, which basically, and you've already alluded to it, was acting like a child. I turned around, here's a great way to reference it, because I was talking to my wife about this, and I said, she teaches kindergarten. I said, if you told a 5-year-old, don't do that, which is basically what a $5,000 fine in the NHL is. That's how much of a joke that is. To sit there and say, don't do that again, and 2 days later, the kid did it again, you're going to be upset about it? That's the way everybody in the league feels, because it's not the first time you've had to tell this guy, stop doing this. And look, it was really ironic, because the way they talked about it on the game last night is the way I describe a lot of stuff when I see stuff like this, is that, if you were just focused on actually playing the game and not starting fights and doing all that stuff, then I'd be okay with a lot of stuff that goes on, but I can clearly tell when you're not thinking about playing hockey. And if you decide to play hockey, that would make it not make it a lot better, but it's like, at least I would see where, then it becomes heat of the moment. That wasn't heat of the moment. I'm not focused on doing anything other than being the guy I am.
Yeah.
And that's the way it was.
It was Bush League last night, honestly. And even Buchnevich, though. So he responded too with just, dumb, stupid.
It was.
And he's going to get suspended for it. At the end of this, this is what we're going to witness. We're going to watch.
I know. I called it ironic, too.
Shane Gostisbehere gets suspended for 2 games. Tom Wilson gets a $5,000 slap on the wrist. And Buchnevich cross-checks. It was Mantha, right? Cross-check Mantha in the face. What are you doing, dude? Don't you have to see, as much as I'm annoyed with Tom Wilson, I'm annoyed with Buchnevich. Like, don't you understand time and awareness? That's a lack of. Just as much as Tom Wilson's unaware to process information, I understand why you're mad, but you're a professional athlete that has to keep your cool. Like, if you want to, I think if you want to win that battle, like that emotional support battle of the NHL and all, you can't have that type of disgusting play of cross-checking someone in the face randomly in the middle of the defensive zone just because you're upset, or offensive, whatever zone it was. They were inside someone's offensive zone. Regardless, you got to keep it cool there, I think.
Well, it happened all over the place though too. That was brewing from the very beginning too. There was stuff going on.
He gave Tom Wilson a 2-hander in the corner to start it all off.
Sure. And look, there was nothing surprising about the start, I guess, like in terms, like we said, they put the fourth lines out there, which kind of indicated exactly where we were heading. It wasn't surprising at all. When was I won't say when was the last time we saw that, but that was very, John Tortorella of them.
I was thinking Flyers, Senators back with Donald Brashear, where there were like 3 guys on the bench.
Well, I was thinking that when the number of penalty minutes skyrocketed to 100 in the first period, like when's the last time we saw anything like that? We don't see it anymore. The guys don't do this anymore. And very clearly there was an emphasis that nothing in that entire first period mattered other than doing that, essentially. There's a reason why there was no score in the period, right? They played 5 minutes and had 6 fights. What do you think? And quite honestly, look, good for Brendan Smith for doing what had to be done, I think, because you knew somebody wanted a piece of Wilson at that point in time. So good for him for being the guy who steps in. It wasn't, it didn't really do much to change anything, quite frankly, because of the fact that at the end of the day, if you really wanted to, and this is a sentiment that was around the league as well from a lot of people, and it's a little bit old school, I'll admit, but there was a lot of people out there going, you really want to make an impact on that team? You really want to show them what happened was unacceptable? The guy you go after is not Wilson, but it's Nick Backstrom. It's John Carlson. You go after somebody who matters to them just as much, because Artemi Panarin's out for 3 more games, or for that game and the 2 more that are left, and shouldn't be, quite frankly. The only reason he's out is because he was involved in that whole scrum to begin with and tried to come to the aid of a teammate. That's why he's not playing. So the way you send your message is not by going after the guy who continues to do it and continues to cross the line and kind of, feeds off the whole thing and is laughing about it. That's why, I don't remember how I texted it to multiple people, so I don't know. I'm sure I sent it to you, but I turned around and I think I said that, Tom Wilson being done after the first period with the upper body injury, right?
Yeah,
the upper body injury from what? Flexing in the penalty box on Monday or running his mouth for the 10 minutes in last night's game.
Yeah, douchebag.
Like, what was it?
Douchebag, the way he stood in there with,
because he sure,
in the box.
maybe I'm pulling the a page back out of the coaching book, as you like to call it, because you referred to that in a previous show. But we just had this where it was, Elaine Vigneault did this in the playoffs last year with the Flyers, where it was, Brendan Gallagher's mouth worked fine when he was trying to get up and talk to people, even though he's got a broken jaw. So it worked fine then, so sure, it's an upper body injury. Yeah, Tom Wilson didn't have a problem running his mouth at the end of the period, though. So I don't buy it.
Regardless, you made the decision. It was the right decision. So I really don't care, who did it. And yeah, you're right. It's full of garbage that he was out of the game with whatever injury they displayed. But I think it was right for what was the circumstances. And I guess with where we are now, I'm a little surprised by some media members, but I'm not at the same time. So Pierre LeBrun, I heard him speaking on TSN, and he said this is prior to last night's game. So this was just after the initial disgusting play went down of Buchnevich and Panarin. And it was like, there's just no part of that in the league anymore. And you need to realize that this toughness and edge that you like out of Tom Wilson, that's not where the game is headed. You need to, as a league, ask the question, where is the game headed? Do we want fighting? Do we want this, or are we trying to get that out of the game and progress with every other sport? And these older generation guys need to understand that it's not what it used to be. It's not what you once watched. Football, basketball, all these sports have adapted, and it's different, and the physicality in 90s basketball is not the same in 2021. And with football, you can't hit the quarterback the same way. You have to adapt as a league, and you need to make it clear on what that adapting is, or you're going to continue to have this type of slop. And then you hear older guys in the league. So I'm big on Toronto sports radio. I love Overdrive. I think it's a phenomenal show. And someone like Jeff O'Neill, who's played in the league forever, and he's like, he did nothing. His response is that punch to Buchnevich's head was his shoulder, and it shouldn't have even been fined because all he did was slap him on the shoulder. And it's like, dude, that's the mentality to me that needs to be gone. That's the mentality that is just irrelevant to today's hockey. You're right. Back in the day, you drop the puck the next whistle. It's not back in the day. So why don't you just register that in your brain and realize that this is the way the league's going? If you don't like it, don't watch. But don't try and hold on to your style of hockey because it's not a thing and it's not going to be a thing because we progressed in sports. So, it annoys me that these people like Pierre LeBrun's adapting with the times. These guys are adapting with the times. But the old school hockey players that are still in the media, they just don't get it.
It was really ironic to watch guys who had that role too and see the difference in their opinion too. Because there was the video of John Scott that came out that basically turned and said there was nothing right about what he did. It crosses a line. But he also didn't sit there and come back with, well, he needs to pay for, or maybe he did a little bit, but you know what I mean? All he sat there and said was he shouldn't be allowed to play in the game, I guess, basically, is what it was. This is not the way the game is.
Let me ask you this. What would satisfy you in terms of, because if you sat out the regular season, that's not punishment. Sure, it might hit your pocketbooks, but unless what they do is they raise the fines insanely where you're seriously getting hit, maybe that works, but can you to suspend them for 3 games of a playoff series? What do you think is legitimately fair for Tom Wilson and that play for a suspension?
I've heard a lot of things. If I was in the position of Department of Player Safety, then I'll go with what I texted you. He was done for the regular season and the first round of the playoffs entirely. I gave him 11. Yeah. And I said, you had 4 left this season. You had 7 games of a playoff series potentially. You're done for 11. And that'll be what it'll be. Whatever the number is, and maybe you could round it down a little bit or bring the number down of games he misses because you just sit there and say first round. If you get knocked out in 5 games, so it's 9, fine. But your season's done, kind of. Maybe you can come back for the second round if your team makes it. Because the other part so there's another element to this that also really got to me that drives me nuts about this. We can talk about former players and people who played in that era and how it's adjusting things. I don't think fighting's gone from the game. I watched a perfectly legitimate one in the game on Tuesday night in the Flyers-Penguins game. Joel Farabee takes a hit. Jake Voracek tries to actually come to his aid and fails miserably because he broke his stick trying to cross-check a guy. But then Farabee actually decides, I'll do it. I'll take care of the task. Drops the gloves and gets into a little bout. And it wasn't anything significant. It wasn't like this big.
He got him good. He got him good. Good for Farabee. I was a little surprised by that. He got him good.
Right, but in general, it's all right. And guess what that was? The players policing it themselves. I didn't like what you did. I'm showing you I didn't like what you did. And nothing happened from it for the rest of the night. That's the way it's done. This idea, Sean Avery, there was a video of Sean Avery that was going around yesterday too. And Sean Avery was the one who kind of was among the many who I eventually saw who were saying, well, if you really want to send a message, you go after one of Washington's stars. And my response to that is that the league doesn't allow for that though. Because do you think for a second, let's just change the team for a minute. Or we don't have to really, because let's just say Alex Ovechkin was actually able to play in the game instead of being hurt. Do you think anybody would let anyone come close to him to do something like that? Not in a million years, because the league knows what would happen if that was the case. The league knows what kind of face that is. They're not going to let that happen, so it handcuffs players. If you would like to be banned for a year? I mean, if you're the player who really goes out there and tries to take a cheap shot at somebody who's a star player on the opposition because something happened to one of your guys 2 nights earlier, would you like to be banned for a year because all eyes are on you? Because that's the way that they would do that. I know it's wrong, but that's what they do, and that's why the game's changing. That's why you can't respond the same way, which to me means that first of all, they just needed to give Wilson the punishment he deserved, especially when he was just suspended 2 months ago. I still can't get over that one. 2 months ago, and we're back to this. But also, now back to the thing that really bothered me. I had to send it over to you because it was up and gone so quickly before you actually got to see it. But whoever works for the Washington Capitals that thought it was a good idea to send a tweet out that basically endorsed all of that, that was a greater thing to me. Like that does more harm to me than even to a sense what Wilson did. Like Wilson crossed the line. Everybody knows it. We're kind of not shocked by it. And then at least at that point in time, what we do from that point forward is we go, whatever happens from here isn't actually Tom Wilson's fault. It's the league's fault for their response to it. So the fighting that happened in the game and all the things that happened in the game and the $5,000 fine, that's on the league because the league puts together the CBA and gets the players to sign off on it. The league is the one that didn't suspend him for the game or beyond and let this thing settle under because you did your job. That's on the league. But for the Washington Capitals, whoever works for them, to put a tweet out that says, we choose violence in that sense, and putting a picture up saying you live rent-free in the heads of the Rangers and everybody else in the league, that was Bush League.
Well,
that's
they
ridiculous.
knew they were wrong because they deleted it. So when you delete it, you know that you're not right.
But that's being cowards. I mean, that's really being a coward at that point in time.
Oh, for sure. So in terms of the superstar thing, I want to touch on that because actually, I know this is a hockey pod, but the same thing just happened in baseball with the Phillies. So Bryce Harper gets hit with a 97-mile-per-hour fastball in the face by someone who, look, he didn't mean to do it. All right, no one's trying to throw 97 at someone's nose. Bryce Harper is too much respect. But in baseball, the traditional way to do it is you go after their best player and throw 97 at their face. And I'm like, that's so dumb. Nolan Arenado has nothing to do at all with that situation. Paul Goldschmidt has nothing to do with that situation. So to me, it's like, in what universe is I need to, because Bryce Harper's missing time now, and it ended up hitting his face and then hitting his wrist. His wrist is a little all over the place, so he's not playing and he's missed some time. To me, it's like, I'm not going after Nolan Arenado and plunking him with 98. The old school baseball would do that, but that's not where the game's at anymore. Like, there's no reason for it. Now, eventually, they ended up doing it in a situation where they policed themselves, and in the 9th inning, when the game was kind of where it was, they threw it on his thigh, and they moved on or whatever. Probably equivalent to the Joel Farabee fight that we brought up. I don't even like that, but my point is, why should, I want to watch sports at its greatest. I want to watch these professional athletes at the highest level. I don't want Nolan Arenado out of the game. I want to watch the best hockey. I want to watch the best product. I don't want to see Alexander Ovechkin getting hurt for something Tom Wilson did, which then takes him off the ice. And then now what I want to see, which is phenomenal hockey, I lose because of something that happened with another player 2 games ago. So that whole thing of going after their top guys, in theory, I get it. But I don't like that. To me, that's stupid because now you're putting somebody else in danger that is irrelevant to that by unfortunate circumstances because a player like Panarin got hurt because of such a douchebag thing that happened with Tom Wilson. So it's like you're hurting other people and other stars for something like that. That shouldn't be how it is. It's not an eye for an eye or 2 wrongs make a right. That's the way that I see that situation in my eyes.
So there's 2 things I'm going to say to this. So first of all, it doesn't compare to the Joel Farabee fight as much because of the fact that I respect the Farabee fight with, I guess that was with Friedman too, I believe.
Yes, and Friedman must have did something in this locker room, by the way.
Oh, I hear you. But but beside the point, that's a heat of the moment thing. The player who actually got hit in the moment goes, I can't let this go at this moment. I'm going to defend myself. And it happens in a matter of 5 seconds. It's not the situation you're talking about in a baseball game where it wasn't even the same game because obviously at that point in time they were handcuffed for the rest of the actual active game. But you know what happens when it happens the next night. It's premeditated. You're thinking about when's the best time to do this, which is the same thing, in my opinion, as dropping the gloves 1 second into a game with the fourth lines on the ice, knowing that was premeditated. Do you think that when Wilson finally got on the ice, that someone going after him was premeditated? Of course it was, because you let it get to that point. You didn't allow it to, not that you didn't allow it to police itself in the game, but if you do your job outside of that, like you let it sit for a day, and look, hockey's different than baseball in that sense, because nobody was going to get suspended in that situation. That was more incidental than anything. And I guess the only thing that was disappointing about that is that what you're doing is that what you're doing from the Phillies sense in that game where two guys get hit in a row. And the issue was, to me, I guess, that they both were warned, when that means now you have to pitch carefully for the rest of the game. You've just established that if there's a line you can't cross, you just drew a second line and said, don't cross this one either. Like, now I can't even throw inside, because if I hit a guy, that guy's out and probably suspended.
Is that better than the alternative? Like, I'm with you. I don't want the warning to the Phillies, because then it's like you can't do anything. But, like, here we are talking about, like, set the line. Make sure it doesn't get crossed. So are we being a little hypocritical saying with those umpires, I don't want to get too sucked into baseball, but my point is, like, they're somewhat, establishing that, like, you can almost give them credit for saying, look, I'm not having it. So it's sort of them setting the precedent. I'm not having it, and that's what the NHL lacks to tie it back to this.
I guess, but see, here's the thing to me. Like, I honestly was a little bit shocked, to be honest, that he just wasn't flat out kicked out of the game in that spot. Like, that's another part of the problem, too. You didn't even kick him out of the game. You gave him 4 minutes for roughing and a 10-minute misconduct and acted like that was just supposed to be okay. And obviously, see, that's the other part of it. Everybody in that moment, like, I think there's also an expectation on the league's part as well, though, like from the Rangers. The Rangers go back, look at the incident, we're going to go back and say we don't, like, he has no respect for the game, all this. This isn't the immediate. This isn't even when the ruling's made. This is before that, where you go, we saw what happened, and if the league does their job, then it'll be handled, and we don't have to take care of it for the rest of the game. We're going to go out and play a game. And when it's not handled, that they sit there and go, now we got to take matters into our own hands then, because the league won't, right? Like, that's what makes the premeditated situation. If you address it in the beginning and you say, okay, like, I think the Rangers pulled back in that game on Monday and went, we saw what happened. The league probably saw what happened too. This will be addressed. It should be. We're not happy with it. We're voicing it in the media right now. And then it got taken to a whole new level when Tuesday night there's a statement that comes out. Like, holy crap, know?
Yeah, that's a whole nother level.
There are statements, and then there are statements. That was gigantic. I mean, nobody does that. No major team in any sport actually releases a statement saying that somebody's not fit to do their job. That was really going at it,
Yeah, I think it's huge. And I remember seeing the Athletic piece, and I highlighted the Athletic piece from the Rangers because I wanted to go back and read everything about it. And unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to yet, so I'm kind of looking it up over here on my side screen. But yeah, I mean, let's get into that side of things, because there was a part now where your president and your GM is fired. And this is all pure speculation on my part, but how much of this was the league saying, dude, I mean, you like, did the league step in and pretty much force the Rangers to make this decision because of what they did? Because, as you mentioned, you do not see this. They just called for someone's job in NHL's player safety, and now the next day their president and their GM is no longer part of that organization. This is nothing but pure speculation in my eyes, but there has to be a correlation between the New York Rangers getting rid of your president and your general manager the second after something so insane and wild happens. Your thoughts? Wow, I'm going to look up this piece on The Athletic just to see if we can dive in more.
So here's where I'm at with this one. It's very different from everything we've talked about so far, because I came on here this morning. We could have done this yesterday, and I was ready to talk about the Tom Wilson situation because I had my mind made up. I had a clear opinion of it, and I knew that there was a lot wrong with it. And honestly, the only thing that made it better that we didn't talk about it yesterday was the fact that we got to see the game itself, which addressed that particular situation. So my brother-in-law asked me about that yesterday, about the Ranger situation with the GM and the president and things like that. And I turned around and I even said, I don't even know where to begin with this one, because that's an onion story. That's got layers to it, right? Like there's got to be more that we don't know yet. That's going to take a long time to come out. I mean, I saw a lot of people saying this is like, what's the documentary going to be called? And they're absolutely right. Like that would make a fascinating 30 for 30 to sit there and say, what happened behind the scenes. I don't fully buy that it has to do with just the statement, because that seems too convenient to me. Like there is an element to this that is, we were thinking about this for a while, and especially to leave them kind of it sounded like a little bit in the dark about the statement even being a thing,
I just can't buy that, though. That's my point. It's like, you're right. It's like in the dark or whatever about the tweet. But I do think there is something to be said about, look, the Rangers underachieved, excuse me. You had some more expectations for them based off of what you saw last year. They came out to a super slow start. They finished in not a realistic opportunity to slide in, but there was maybe some false optimism that they could maybe make the playoffs and whatnot. But you're right. I mean, there is a level of they underachieved, but is that what maybe they're banking on using that as one of the reasons why I don't know. I mean, you don't see someone get called out for their job the way that the Rangers put out in a press release, and to see two people get canned right after. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's really tough to dive into this, and unfortunately, I can't find what I was looking for.
I said it was a 48 hours. We sit there and go, it's been a week, it's been a day. It's been quite a 48 hours for the New York Rangers, from all the stuff on Monday night to the Tuesday statement when no suspension was handed down. It was just a fine.
Poor Chris Drury. I mean, he finally gets an opportunity, and nobody even. That's the 75th story on the actual list of things to discuss. Is what do you think Chris Drury's impact's going to be? Not one soul is mentioning Chris Drury today.
No, and it's funny because, truth be told about his situation, he really did wait it out for the opportunity. He could have gone to a lot of teams, gotten a lot of jobs. I believe he was in discussion for the Pittsburgh job when that time rolled around. It was like, they were interested, and he wouldn't go. And it's like, that's that. Now think about that, though. That was a situation earlier this year. This isn't even like an off-season thing where, GM spots open up and people can interview him. One earlier this year. And he's not able to I don't even know if he interviewed. I think he even declined that. I wonder why now.
Yeah.
Was something bubbling up then?
It's a good
how
point.
Many months ago that was? Like, that things were not good, that things were not. I believe I read something at some point too about that, where it had less to do with John Davidson and more to do with Jeff Gorton, who was, the GM of the team, where it was they were not liking how quickly things were moving per se, or the lack thereof of speed moving forward. And you can't fault the guy for sitting here saying patience, 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 when we've watched Lafreniere take some steps in the second half to be more like the player we expected. You've recently picked second in a draft too, so you've got a guy in that regard. He's built it just about the right way in every sense, because you've drafted well. You've got
free
people
agents,
saying you
pick up Panarin.
Well, right.
I mean, that's
right.
huge.
So you're signing big names. You're drafting guys who very quickly in their careers are becoming guys who people go should win an award, right? Like, how quickly did Adam Fox catapult his career from basically being a good pick and a good prospect to Norris candidate, right? Like, very quickly. So you've got a defenseman to build around. People love Shesterkin. So like, they're going, there's the goalie to build around. You've got forwards to build around. You've signed big free agents. You even dating back as far as getting Zibanejad. So you've done it in every way that you can build a team.
Remind me, how did they get Zibanejad again? Do you remember?
I believe it might have been. I don't think it was free agency. I think it was a trade. Believe it or not, because it was. I think it was like.
I'm going to Google it.
16, I think it was.
On July 2016, the Senators traded Zibanejad to the Rangers, as well as a second-round pick for Brassard and a 2018 seventh-rounder. I mean, that's huge.
So it was but there you go, though. That's an off-season deal. I mean, the irony is that was 2016, and actually, ironically, the Senators made a big-time run the following year, only to be, the team that they are right now, I guess. But, and it's not to say they don't have some players of quality. They do. They're building too. But
here's a quote I found in The Athletic, though, about everything. So The
go ahead, yeah.
The Athletic has confirmed that the firing of Davidson and Gorton was not related to the Dolan-ordered statement released Tuesday by the NHL Department of Player Safety directing Parros' mishandling of Tom Wilson's situation. That statement, in which the Rangers called Parros unfit and charged with dereliction of duty, will have a long-term word that I'm not going to try and pronounce, effect on the league's relationship with the franchise. It's probably like a really standard word. Not to mention that it will very likely lead to a hefty fine. I'm curious on what exactly that's going to be. So, and here's the thing, though, with some of these national reporters and whatnot, they're going to protect the league as much as possible. They're a part of the league. So, you could say The Athletic has confirmed this. I also heard Adam Schefter say a lot of great things about Howie Roseman, the Eagles general manager, because their relationship is like this, and they want to keep the relationship. So I don't know when some of these Athletic pieces, some of these national guys or some of these reporters in general, they want to make sure that they're on the same page here. And this looks like to be just a New York Rangers Athletic beat reporter, not so much a league reporter. But regardless, you get my point. I don't know exactly how to put stock into it. It's just
there was a paragraph from a New York Post article too. It might have been Larry Brooks who wrote it, who just like this whole thing went down, and it was basically the story confirming everything and all that stuff or whatever. The paragraph was so. I mean, how much of this stuff sounds familiar to you? Because it sure sounded familiar to me, based on where we live and the team that is local to us. Because this was big time. This was James Dolan big time flexing the Snyder muscles here, kind of in a way. Like, I didn't like what happened around the league, so I'm ordering my team to release a statement that says we don't think a guy's fit to do his job. I mean, that was Ed Snyder in 1999 in the locker room after losing a series to Toronto, making a call like that to end a team season. You need to look at, like, the whole league needs to be examined at that point. Like, it's the same thing. The only difference was he got up in front of a microphone and said it. And this is what you can do today.
Yeah. And
basically that's about it.
And speaking of old hockey, with the Flyers, did you see that clip running around of that Game 7 in Toronto where Sammy Kapanen gets rocked, but Jeremy Roenick? First off, it's crazy to think how in that era of hockey, when Sammy Kapanen can't skate off the ice in the back, they just pretend like it's just another play, and it actually makes me cringe watching a human being be in that state of mind. But to see Jeremy Roenick score the goal, and then Keith Primo's just like hugging Sammy Kapanen's helmet on the bench, like, dude, you just won Game 7. Oh my God, just the emotions. I'll never see Flyers hockey that way again. I'm just convinced. But anyway, here's my thing. So
the state of him in that, like, you're talking about the state after the hit.
Yeah.
He's full on horizontal when he gets hit. I mean, this is a guy who's moving, who knows how. Like, this is like the collision between two moving vehicles here, where it's like one of them just stops the other one dead in its tracks. I mean, he got flattened on that. I remember watching that still.
I thought you were going to drop F-bomb on me there.
No, I didn't have anything like that.
I thought you were about to drop the F-bomb on me.
No, but I'll tell you what. I'll tell you. Yeah, I hear you. I'll tell you what, though. Watching, between everything going on with all the stuff we've been talking about on this show, I will tell you, it requires a lot of restraint on my part, because it pissed me off this week watching all that.
Let it fly, baby. All right, so before we, all right, so
I'm too much of a radio guy for that.
Yeah, you're right. I do have one more concept to touch on, but it's not Tom Wilson related. So are you?
Oh, good.
Are you out on the Tom Wilson? I think we're 43 minutes in. I think we're good on the Tom Wilson. Do you agree?
Oh, I don't know if we should give him any more airtime. I think
right.
That would be what he wanted to.
Yep. Okay, so here's the last part of the show. It doesn't have to be long, but just TJ Oshie, man. I'll tell you what.
That was cool.
Yeah. I mean,
that was real cool.
Dude, my heart was just in a spot of, I don't even know how to describe it, but heartwarming. I think everyone kind of had that same reaction. And, man, I'll tell you what, to score a hat trick in a game like that, I think right now, like, my body somewhat has those goosebumps flowing through it. I can only imagine. Now, it's not the same at all, but it's kind of similar. So, I've been through this a lot. I'm not a goal scorer, stay-at-home defenseman. Every year, though, I found a way to score one goal a year. And I did have a family member, my uncle. This was years and years ago. So my uncle passed away, and my next game was the game that I scored that one goal for the year. And it's like, Dude, I remember because when I watched TJ Oshie start balling, like I don't know if he was balling, you couldn't really tell, but he was
by the end of it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was after. I think it was the first or second goal. All you saw was him hunched over on the bench, and you could just see the top of his helmet. I remember having that same type of reaction, and my coach put his hand over my shoulder, and he knew because I had to miss time, some practices to go to the funeral and all. So he knew what was going on, and like your body just takes over. Like holy hell, like. You're telling me it's just crazy how it happens. I remember being in that situation and just from all the moments with the Stanley Cup and him and his dad and knowing everything behind it. I mean, it's heartwarming. So to end on a positive, I mean, it's not a positive, but it's not, but
it's
it is. It's a heartwarming feel.
No, I don't remember which writer tweeted it, but someone tweeted that like maybe it was so far down the line or whatever it was by the time it actually happened, because there was so much else that happened in that game that it almost gets lost. That's how sad it is that it almost gets lost. But someone turns it that like that might be the feel good story of the year, quite honestly, like one of them, and it is. You know, he had somebody with him last night to do that, and I honestly I didn't expect him to play when I found out what it was, because he didn't play Monday, and it just said personal reasons, and you don't know what that means in this time. You know, it could mean a lot of things. I'm not saying that I didn't know. Like, everybody knew what the situation was for him with his dad. You know, everybody knew, because everybody knew that from when they won the cup. Like, that was a whole big story then. Everybody knew what his father was going through and how it was, you know, what it was doing to his health and all that type of stuff. Nobody would have guessed what it was, though, when you just hear personal reason, especially, you know, given how quickly things have changed this year in particular. It's like a personal reason could be somebody in your family is sick just in general. It didn't have to be his father. It was just somebody sick and you need to take time for something, or it's just a hard time right now. Like, a lot of guys have to be experiencing that in general, this idea that it's hard this year to do things. I mean, the whole Robin Lehner thing from a couple weeks back, where it was like, they're doing things differently than the rest of the world is to make sure they can play. So maybe that's why you have to take more time for something, whatever. And then when basically Tuesday morning, when after all the other stuff in that game went on Monday night, you go, oh, great. Like, that's what it was. And your heart just goes out to him right then and there. And I kind of thought by finding that out on Tuesday, because he sure made it sound like when he tweeted that out, it happened Tuesday morning, right? So I'm going, there's no way he plays Wednesday, right? Like, there's just no way. It's too soon. He's going to take some time. Maybe he's back by the weekend. Maybe he just focuses on getting back for the playoffs, you know, whatever. And he's back the next game, and then he scores the first goal of the game.
Sometimes that helps. Sometimes that helps, though, with like you just get back to, you know, like you need that. You see the reaction. I think it was maybe Backstrom. I forget who made the comment. So, like, he's one of the strongest guys I've seen. Like, just the fact that you get the hugs and support and like that locker room and just the fellas, like that can really put you in a good mental spot during an emotional time for sure.
Well, not only that, but I mean, what you kind of look back at it now and go, what did you expect for a guy that they called coach, you know? Like,
yeah.
If the guy was his coach all that time and still treated like a coach all those years, then what do you think he wanted him to do the next day?
My buddy was pissed, though, because a couple guys were going after him trying to fight him, like just because of the style of the game. It's like
right. If there was one guy who was untouchable, it was him.
Yeah,
you know, for sure.
Yeah,
like that's why you tread lightly on the whole thing about going after one of their star players, which kind of doesn't solve anything either. It's like, pick anybody else in the game who qualifies as a star player for them, as someone who does something, and go, sure, everybody else in the game is probably fair game at that point. If somebody wants a piece of John Carlson, if somebody wants a piece of Nick Backstrom, if Ovechkin was playing, if somebody wanted to do that, I'm not saying it makes it right, because you're right. It's funny because I've heard this a lot when it came to the baseball one too. What's the better way to get back at a team for doing something to you?
Kick their ass.
Go win the game.
Yeah.
Go win the game.
That's what I meant. Not like physically. I meant like on the ice.
Go win the game.
Yeah.
And now it's a shame that the Rangers are out of the playoff picture, because that really does, you know, it doesn't really solve much when one team's got the rest of their season to go. Like, maybe that's why the Rangers were focused the way they are. We're done in 2 games or 3 games or whatever's left for the Rangers. I think it's 2. And Washington's not. They're going to the playoffs. Let's try to hurt them. You know, maybe that's what it was. And again, avoidable, right, if the league just does their job. But for Oshie to do that and get the hat trick, it kind of felt like it was a kismet moment when he's out there not only at the end of the game, because I think you knew that was going to happen toward the end. They were short-handed on forwards, by the way, too, throughout that game, too. I think they were down to 10 by that point. So it was easy to throw him out there.
Yeah.
But he gets that goal, and that was really see, you're talking about, like, I think you were talking about, like, after the first one, just scoring the first goal, the emotion at that point. I think he kind of held it together at that point because there was way more game to be played. When he scores the third one and it's 4-1, the game's over, you know you're going to win the game. I don't know if he took another shift because he couldn't keep it together at that point, and you understand why at that point. Like, that's just, I mean, that'll stick with him for the rest of his life, for
no
sure.
doubt.
A hat trick afterwards, like,
No doubt.
And he's truth be told, he's one of the good guys on that team. Like, in that sense, like, I don't like a lot of the guys on their team for the attitudes they have and things like that. And you saw as soon as Wilson got into a fight, Garnet Hathaway's up in the box, and he's tried to stir some things up in previous weeks
he
too.
Was banging on the glass, right? With that fight right in front of the box.
But in general, like, that's a guy who's good. He's been good for not just for the game in general, but like an American player who's gotten high recognition.
Oh yeah,
like,
we'll
so
never forget that. I mean, that's
right.
Just
so
unreal.
like, it's just,
does he go down?
He's definitely.
Does he go down as a Capital or a Blue? How many years did he play in St. Louis? Played a lot. He's about to match it basically in Washington, and he has the cup, so you probably think of him as a Capital. Yeah. Interesting, but all right. Well, there we go. There's our episode today. We were we were fired up in the beginning. We seemed to simmer down a little bit towards the end, but we were you went to
Oshie. That kind of mellowed us back out.
Yeah, it's true. But look, we had some other there's so many good conversations still to be had before we dial into the playoffs, but I'm just so pumped, man. I'm ready for playoff hockey. I think while last night was a terrible, terrible, terrible day for hockey, in my opinion, for just the everything other than TJ Oshie scoring the goals, it's like I'm ready for playoffs. Like the hatred is kind of like snowballing to me towards the playoffs, but I don't want to make it seem like that's a positive towards what we saw because I thought that was terrible. But before you know
there's good hatred and there's not. You know what I mean? Like, there's the good bad blood that boils when two teams meet for 7 games in a row, and that's all well and good, and it's usually nothing more than like the shoving matches in the corners, right? Like, that's all good. Keep that stuff going. I can't wait for that type of stuff. Who knew? We thought we were doing this episode going to be talking about playoff teams and more Matthews McDavid stuff because that's prevalent, and we're going to have to put it on hold until the next one because a lot of other stuff happened, right?
Guess what? That other stuff might happen again this week. You never know with this crazy.
Oh, that would be interesting. Yeah,
crazy NHL world. But all right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Open Ice Hits, and we'll catch you next week.